Hey there, this is Janda Smith, and I am going to go over a study today with you of the book of Acts. Now, I don't know about you, but when I've read the Bible, there have been times where I will just read it like a storybook, because it is full of true stories. However, I have found that while studying the Bible, it is more than just a storybook. There are so many in-depth facts to be learned and to apply to our lives within those stories, period. So let's look at the book of Acts and see things that we haven't considered before, some parallels, if you will. Now, the first part of Acts has events that are almost identical to the second part of Acts. And I'm going to show you those things today. We're going to take the book of Acts and split it between chapters 1 through 12 and chapters 13 through 16. Now, in the chapters 1 through 12, Jerusalem is the center of the outreach. That's where we were told to go first. In Acts 1:8, it says, "But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." Now, in the second half, Antioch was the center for Gentile outreach, and the disciples were called Christians there first. That's found in Acts 11:26. Now, as far as to continue those parallels, we have that Peter is the chief figure in the first half, and Paul is the chief figure in the second half. Peter takes the gospel out into Samaria. Now, Paul took it as far out as Rome, and the reason why is because he was imprisoned at the time. He had gotten an appeal or requested an appeal to Caesar, which meant that he would have to travel all the way to Rome. So he was able to witness and spread the gospel all the way there and while he was there. So that's how it got that far. Now, unfortunately, the word was rejected by the Jews in their homeland, but also in their dispersion. The dispersion is when they were exiled from Babylon. Sadly, Peter was imprisoned. Again, we just talked about Paul being imprisoned. And there was a judgment on Herod, and there was also a judgment on the Jews. So as you can see with these parallels, that's a lot of information. But let's dig a little deeper, since I've piqued your interest, between Peter and Paul as chief figures in their respective chapters. Now, while the chapters may appear to be out of order when you see the numbers, it still reflects the truth of a parallel comparison. Keep in mind that when we are reviewing this, that we are going deeper between the two persons themselves. Now, they each had a first sermon. They each healed a man. They each had to deal with sorcerers. Simon, the sorcerer, had to be spoken to by Peter, and Paul did Elymas. They each had an influence. Keep in mind the reference here of influence is referring to the faith of God as our healer. So Paul would walk and people would go into his shadows and be healed, but it was the faith of God that he had in him. And as far as the handkerchief goes, I'm sorry, that was Peter with the shadow. Paul had the handkerchief. People would touch it and be healed. But it's all about the faith they had in God. It was the act of faith to use them. And we do the same thing today with prayer cloths or pocket quilts. We will anoint them with oil in faith, as well as laying on hands and anoint people for healing for that. So these things do still occur today. Some more parallels I wanted to look at between those two characters is that they both were worshipped. Unfortunately, people looked up to them for their relationship with Christ instead of developing their own. That's something we need to definitely be in consideration when we have a role model, that we don't idolize them. They both raised people from the dead. Tabitha was raised by Peter, and Eutychus was raised by Paul. And again, they were both in prison. That's still the same between the two links there. But as you can see, there was quite a few parallels. I would recommend that you do an in-depth study with the chapter numbers that I gave you into this book of Acts and research them for yourselves. I would also recommend you looking at a comparison and parallels between the Old Testament and New Testament. And if you want another subject matter to dig into, look at Adam and Eve to Israel, and then Israel to Christ. It is an amazing find. I hope that you found this as interesting as I did, and I hope that you enjoy your studies.